Okay, great. So you should be able to see my screen now. So this is our homepage. If you Hamiltonianartists.org or ha-dc.org. And so what you're going to do is you're going to navigate to our fellowship menu. And we actually just announcing our jurors this week, and you can see them here. Each year we kind of select a range of, like, definitely one Hamiltonian Artist alumni, someone who's been through the fellowship program, local curators, other practicing artists, and usually someone who has experience in like the gallery space, and then also someone who has some kind of like arts education experience, maybe works in a nonprofit arts worker capacity. So we try to get like a broad range of perspectives. Generally, we kind of go for those categories to ensure kind of balance in terms of where people are coming from. But every year we encourage people to apply, whether you've applied 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. You just never know, because there's always a new set of jurors, and new jurors always kind of bring different perspectives with them. Even while we do provide a kind of scoring criteria, different people have different tastes. So what you want to do is definitely spend time with the About page. Something that comes up sometimes is like, what are the benefits? These are listed here, very in-depth, and then along with the expectations. The benefits are, a $2,000 honorarium annually, a $750 exhibition artwork production budget, access to a shared studio space. This is based on need. So what we do is we kind of will like assess who all part of the fellowship needs a studio space. If a fellow has a studio space, then we won't allocate studio space, because then, unless a situation, for instance, at the studio located with us is a lot more convenient leading up to their show, we're happy to do that. Our big thing is we want the studios to remain in use. We only have 5 available to anybody at all. It's a resource, and we try to keep it available. So we do offer that on a need basis. And we just ensure that if you need access to that studio, you have access to it for at least 6 weeks leading up to your show. Individualized mentorship is another offering. What we'll do is kind of assess what you're looking for, and maybe if there's someone you're interested in being mentored by, and we'll facilitate and pair you with that person. That is a paid opportunity for the mentor. So it is a formalized kind of experience. And then that mentor will then do a studio visit with you and do a project presentation meeting, participate in project presentation meetings. That's something that's highlighted here, the kind of project exhibition planning and coordination support. Those project presentation meetings will take place about 2 to 3 times leading up to your show. The idea is we really want to be able to offer consistent feedback throughout the process while you're leading up to the show. So that could be like, the first one is very loosely like, here's where my practice is out now. Here's maybe where I'm thinking about going direction-wise for my show. And then, of course, as you get closer, it's like, okay, here's what the show is about. And then right before your show, it's like, this is what the work is, and this is the show. And we're really getting into fine-tuning in terms of like, how is it going to be installed? Like, what's the language on your exhibition statement, things like that. And this is something that, your mentor, staff, and other fellows will attend. So you get that kind of very close-knit community feedback. And yeah, the list goes on. Public programming, internal programming. We will sometimes have field trips. We're able to go off-site, engage maybe with local institutions. And just generally, we try to connect fellows with who they're interested in connecting with, whether that's immediately locally or like beyond the area. And then the expectations, I feel like, are pretty straightforward. The primary expectation is to show up and engage. So that's, showing up for your peers, showing up for, programming that's unrelated to the fellowship, just to, learn and engage with other local artists and arts workers, and have more opportunities to build network and community. And then also some things related to your show, like giving an artist talk for your show, of course, developing your exhibition. These are all kind of very baseline expectations. But the largest thing is really just generally holistic participation is the sweeping expectation from fellows. And so then we go to the apply section. And here you can kind of get a sense of what the application period is, and then also the fellowship cycle. If you were to apply and get selected this year, then the fellowship would begin in October of this year. And I think sometimes maybe a misconception is that the fellowship ends when your solo happens, but it continues essentially until the last person in your cohort is finished with their solo show. So the shows are kind of staggered. So for instance, there could be a fellow who their solo show might not end until December of like 2027, for instance. So we expect fellows to continue to show up for the full 2 years. Your show would happen it could happen at the middle of the second year or the beginning of the second year, depending on where you are and the kind of rotation. But the fellowship experience goes on beyond that. There's still programming. There's still project presentation meetings to show up for, even if maybe your big project has been presented and done. Here's the eligibility information. You must be 21 years old or older by the first day of fellowship. Cannot be a full-time student or equivalent during fellowship. Hate to say it, but it's just really difficult to show up in fellowship experiences while being a full-time student. Our big thing is that we want people to show up and engage, right? And so I think it's really important to have the capacity to do so. We understand that people have lives. Oftentimes, all fellows, I've been asked sometimes, oh, like what do fellows do in terms of if they have a job? Pretty much every fellow who has come through the program has had a job because people usually have to work. So that's completely reasonable. I think in terms of, we never want people to have to choose between school and the fellowship. We consider school to be a whole experience in itself. We want you to be able to show up fully in that space and then come to us when you're finished with that program, please, and apply then. You must live within 150 miles of DC for the full duration of the fellowship. This is a newer thing that we're doing. It's really important, again, to be present. We do a combination of in-person and virtual programs, and we definitely try not to be too demanding in terms of in-person participation. Usually I would expect about 1 to 2 times per month to see fellows in person and, just to be accommodating. But I think that it becomes really difficult when people are way too far, because then that also becomes cost prohibitive because it becomes very expensive to get to DC. So to just mitigate that, we've put in place the 150-mile radius just to simplify things a bit, but also still our big thing is like keeping artists in DC and then also bringing others in, because we do want a wide range of perspectives to engage artists who don't just live in the immediate kind of DMV metro area. No more than one solo exhibition at a traditional gallery setting within the greater metropolitan DC area prior to applying for the fellowship. BFA and MFA shows do not count toward that limit, so no worries there. And nonprofit galleries do count toward that limit. Yes, so this is really primarily just because we need to make sure that through the Hamiltonian Artists Fellowship Program, it's very impact centered. So it's like we want to offer the opportunity to people who have never really had that big like debut moment in the area. We want to offer that to people. And so if you've had more than one, solo exhibition at a traditional gallery setting in the area, then you've kind of already met that achievement. And we want to make space for people who haven't. Would a solo at a community center be counted? If it's a community center, then I would say it just depends on if the community center also functions as a gallery. Like if it's, for instance, if it's a formal gallery space within a community center, then I would say that does count. For instance, nonprofit galleries count because they're nonprofits, but they're still galleries, if that makes sense. Whereas say like if you showed work in a community center that simply also shows art, but is not a gallery, then no, I would say that doesn't count. Thank you for that question. And let's see. And then, so application requirements from there, pretty straightforward. You'll see requirements like this across most applications these days. Artist bio, artist statement, CV, 3 references, portfolio. We do have some criteria for how you need to label your files, which is right here. Please be sure to follow that. You can also preview the application questions here. I would definitely suggest, as you're working through your application, like copy and paste these questions, work on them in a separate document, and then type them in SlideRoom. I would say SlideRoom is pretty tech friendly. Like people haven't really had issues with SlideRoom in terms of saving, but I just find that it's maybe a bit easier in terms of workflow. Would a show in grad school count? Not part of an MFA program, though. Grad school exhibition would count, yes, even if it's maybe not maybe not necessarily an MFA program, it still does count. I have the same question. What does Capitol Hill Arts Workshop count as a gallery or community center that also shows art? I would say Capitol Hill Arts Workshop is tricky because I do believe that they refer to the gallery space as a gallery. I would say that's like a little bit of a gray area. Yeah, I would say that's a little bit of a gray area because from what I recall, I think they do refer to it as a gallery space, but I could be wrong. I would just look into that a little bit further. And yeah, I would say don't worry about it though in that situation because it does also function, that gallery space does function as a part of the center. So yeah, I would say that's not a big deal. Good question. And then, yes, and then we also have office hours like available, which I can get to a little bit later if you still have very specific questions about your application and want to have one-on-one conversation. The application fee is $20. We don't want to be cost prohibitive ever. So if this poses an issue for you and you literally can't apply because you do not have the $20, please send an email to lily@ha-dc.org and we will get that waived for you. Review process and criteria, pretty straightforward. The applications are reviewed by that panel, as I was saying, the jury, and then following the online review, they'll score it, and then the jurors will then meet and kind of go through the top 20 scorers, narrow down the fellowship finalists to then be interviewed by our staff, and then the final cohort selection is approved by the jurors. And then from there, the fellows are invited to participate. And usually the question will come up of how many fellows get selected. It can be anywhere from 3 to 5. It really depends on, our goal is to like shape a balanced cohort. So depending on who the finalists are and depending on how those interviews go, it could be, oh, this 3 really like makes sense as a group. Or it could be like these 4 like make really a lot of sense as a group. It really just depends on the year. So it could be up to 5 though. It could be as little as 3.
I have a question. Is it your date on there is for July 27th? That's like a week and a half from now?
Yes.
So we have to have the application, everything done and submitted by the 27th. Okay.
Yeah. The application, it's been open since June 16th. So, but I would say, I think there's definitely still time to apply. A lot of the information, for instance, like bio and things like that, some of those things are a little bit easier than other things. Certain questions will take more time, and we'll get into that a little bit when I pull up Slide Room. Must applicants be U.S. citizens, or can they apply on a student visa? Yeah, that's no problem. You don't have to be a U.S. citizen. You can definitely apply on a student visa. We've had many different fellows come through the program who are actively pursuing like a O1 visa or like different things like that. So that's cool. What qualities make up a well-shaped cohort? That's a good question. I think in terms of qualities, we're looking for, in terms of thinking about balance, I would say it's often a matter of, okay, what are the different disciplines that our people are engaging? So we try to have a range of different like practices, just even based off material and processes. And then another thing will be, what are people's conceptual interests? How do they differ or how do they overlap? So we'll try to find a balance of like breadth, but also these moments in which maybe there's commonalities between certain people, where it's like, oh, like these people are like different in these ways, but like they share this one maybe material interest or this one like way that they engage art making that could make for interesting conversation. Or like, oh, this person is very like has a very big background in performance but wants to get more into sculpture. This person is very sculpture based and like, is also thinking about the body. Like it depends on the people who are finalists, but in general, we kind of think about how do they make, why do they make, like what are their inspirations, and like how do they think about their practices and what are their influences. Those are our primary focuses when we think about striking a balance between different things. And we want there to be a lot of different attributes that can kind of find little moments of coalescing, so that way people can learn a bunch and like be exposed to different things and maybe even be pushed out of their comfort zone, but also find these moments of like understanding and like, wow, like this person is interested in similar things as well, or like we share some commonalities. Thank you for that question. That's a really good question. Definitely check out our FAQ page. There's a lot of information here that is commonly asked. Please explore all of these areas. It's like pretty comprehensive, but like I said, if there's any questions still, we're gonna do our best to give you some feedback. And then from there, we go to apply here. I already have the application pulled up. So these are all of the fields as I shared in the previous page. The first ones are pretty straightforward. This will most likely be something that you already have on hand from other applications, your artist bio and your artist statement. We kind of give a little bit of background of what you should think about in terms of making sure you have certain information included in that paragraph. I would definitely suggest if you copy and paste from a previously used bio or statement, definitely take a moment to like zhuzh it up a bit and make sure that it is up to date, make sure that it is well written and thorough, because it is a very competitive application process and jurors will be reading a lot of these. So do your best to really make sure that you are generous in the information that you offer, and also make sure that you really pay attention to the fields that are being asked, because if there's missing information, that's like an easy way to like, miss out on points or something. The artist statement, I would say, is also really important because we want to understand what are the main themes in your work, what kind of work do you make, what does it look like, how do you show it, different things like that, who your influences are even, like what do you think about when you're making work, what do you want people to think about when you're making work, or like what is the kind of conversation that you're looking to drive forward with your practice. Hamiltonian Fellows are each asked to focus on a single major project throughout the duration of their fellowship, culminating in a solo show or presentation in their second year. So we say solo show or presentation because it can look like different things. So, someone might, want to do something that is, I don't know, like a experimental like film screening, where they might say, black out the gallery and then project a series of alternating films throughout the process of the run of the show, right? Not quite, a solo show in a maybe traditional sense, maybe more of an active kind of space making approach. Could be someone who maybe wants to do something more like installation based. Maybe it's a living, changing like installation that the artist then comes in and adjusts throughout the run of the show. Like, we're very open to what that can look like. We've also had a fellow curate an exhibition as their final project. It really is like as traditional or non-traditional as you would like for it to be. Of course, that's just like a conversation, and that's just something really for you to think about in terms of how it connects to your practice, because it does need to make sense for your work. It can't just be like random or something you want to try out that's like cool. Well, that's awesome. It's like, that's not really what this space is for. Justifying anything that you're presenting is the most important thing. So you want to describe an artistic pursuit that you might build upon. This is like, I would say, really hone in on that language, like describe a current artistic pursuit that you might want to build upon. I think that is important because you don't have to approach this space as like, oh, my show is going to be 24 paintings that are going to be presented in this way, and they're going to be oil and it's going to be figurative. And it's like, you don't have to flesh out and really tell us exactly what the show is going to look like. You have 2 years to pin that down. And also, even if you did say that, that's going to probably change. It's 2 years. So really, this is a space to focus on where's your practice now, and what is maybe a body of work or a way of making that you want to expand upon, and what is kind of the trajectory of that expansion look like, and what shape might that take in terms of a final presentation. So I say that to say it can be pretty loose and like pretty broad, and don't focus too much on describing or like necessarily pitching a exhibition in that way, if that makes sense. Because you want to also give yourself space to explore, which is a huge part of the fellowship experience, is to just like, to pursue different directions and really kind of follow curiosity and see where it leads, more than like a final destination being already very defined. How do you envision the next phase of your professional career as an artist? So this is also a space where you can be pretty specific, but also a little bit more, I think you can also be a bit more broad in how you answer this, and it really should be unique to you. So in terms of envisioning the next phase of your career, that could look like, oh, I want to show more, I want to get more exhibitions. I would like to have, more opportunities to get my work written about or covered in press. Maybe I want to go back to school and like get my MFA. Maybe I want to do more collaborative projects. Maybe I want to work like on a more commission based, studio practice where I'm able to like make money off of clients and like patrons and things like that. Really think about the kind of universe of like steps that can be taken in an artist career, and think about which of those steps align with your goals as an artist and where you'd like to land. Whether you want to go in a very like commercial market driven direction, maybe you want to go in a more kind of experimental and like artist collective, maybe artist activist kind of direction. There's many different ways to show up as a working artist, and through the fellowship we really try to hold space for all of those things. So yeah, just take the time to really reflect and then kind of give us some insight as to that. The fellowship is also, like I said, very professional development centered. So it's important for us to understand like what is it that you're trying to navigate and what are the challenges that you have. Some people will say like, oh, it's not good to, some people say, oh, I don't have any weaknesses, or like, I'm not gonna like share my weaknesses because then that doesn't make me look like an impressive artist. It's like, no, I think actually this is the space for us to kind of embrace those areas that maybe we're not so confident in. That is the point, is to build confidence in those spaces. And so, yeah, ask yourself, what are the areas of my like the way that I show up as an arts professional that I feel like I'm lacking some know-how and lacking that sense of like, security and confidence to be able to move as a professional. That could look like, oh, like I'm not very good with networking. Like I have trouble, I don't know how to go about reaching out and making new connections, or once I make a connection, I don't really know how to follow up on it. Maybe you feel like part of your professional challenge is like, oh, I don't have a formal training in the arts. And that's something that I'm dealing with, and I'm not sure what that means for me. I think this is a space that you should really reflect on, like, where are you right now in your artistic career as a kind of emerging artist? And then from there, it's like, what are the aspects that you feel like when you sit down and you're like, oh man, like I wish I was more so in this space? Like, what are the things that you feel like are holding you back from that? Or would really, not so much holding you back, but like, what are the forms of support and forms of education that you feel like would help you better reach that, or put you in a better position to be able to pursue those things? Using our fellowship offerings as a blueprint, what knowledge, skills, and overall professional development will help you mitigate these challenges? So yeah, like I was saying, identify those challenges, and then in this space, really kind of look at our fellowship offerings and identify which of those offerings, could be all of them, could be some of them, would help you better navigate those challenges, and put you in a better position to, like I said, pursue that kind of next phase of your career. This is here. This is another pretty short question. These are really short because it can be pretty brief. It's like very straightforward. And also really be sure to like look at those offerings. As I said, to us, it's really important for artists to be impacted through the fellowship program, like to maximize what artists are getting out of it. So we want to know that the fellowship offerings best align with your needs. It might be that the offerings don't align with your needs, and maybe there are things that you need that just don't make sense for you in this space, and this is also a space for you to kind of interrogate that. Maybe what you need is like, you have all the stuff, but maybe you really need to go get an MFA, like, who knows? If you want to maybe like go into teaching and you want to be a professor at like a really prestigious arts university, then, maybe it's like you have to go get that specific certification. This is a space for you to really reflect and do that work. So that way you can figure out if this fellowship is even going to give you the tools that are going to get you better positioned to go in the direction that you want to go in. Are you currently operating within or in search of an artist community? In either case, what does showing up in that community look like for you? Yeah, this is a space to really kind of, I think, also do some visioning. If you're in an artist community, you can be very direct in naming how you show up. That's totally fine. You can describe experiences that you've had in your artistic community, maybe like name generally the ways that you engage in those spaces and like how you give or receive. But then beyond that, maybe if you're not in an artistic community and you're searching for that, really use this as a space to kind of imagine yourself in an artistic community in a more kind of idealistic sense and be like, wow, how would I show up? Like, in my personality, in the way that I deal with the arts and the way that I deal with other artists, like what would it look like for me to engage that kind of space? And then really kind of like let us see that and do a little bit of like world building there, because some people don't have that. And we also understand like that's real. We just want people to show up authentically. So that could look like, oh, like I'm the person who goes to all of the crit groups, or like I want to be that person because I love to talk about art and I love making, and I'm really curious about how other people go about their processes. That could be, part of your response. Or like, oh, I'm the person where maybe like I don't talk as much, but I like always am trying to do a one-on-one studio visit with someone, or like I want more of that, or I want to have more people in my studio. Or like maybe I'm the person who like, as soon as I find resources, I like forward it to somebody, like how do you move in a spirit of, like mutual support, peer learning. We really want to identify those kinds of candidates. So this is a space to really flesh that out. Please list 4 artists you like to think about. It's pretty straightforward. I would just ask that you answer that genuinely. Don't just like Google 4 best artists or something like that, or like ask ChatGPT. Like, just be real about the artists that you like. It's not a trick question. What are some of your interests outside of art? Again, not a trick question. You just want to know, like, what's your deal as a person? And yeah, because it's 2 years again, you spend a lot of time with people, and there's the art making, but also, you ideally build relationships in the space as well. Do you currently have a studio space? That's like a logistics question. And you can answer this, you're not bound to anything. So when you like answer this question of if you have a studio space, don't worry if you click yes, like we're not going to give you a studio or something. It doesn't work like that. We're just trying to get a sense of things and maybe just kind of like make a note of that. But ultimately, once it gets closer to time, if you are a fellow, then we're always going to circle back and be like, hey, like, do you still not need a studio, or has anything changed and you do need a studio? So don't worry about, things change. It's fine. Hamiltonian Artists will provide 1 studio free of charge on a rotating basis. Would you be interested in using the studio? How would you use it? Again, this is a question really to identify a need, and if it's actually feasible for you to be making use of that space, because we want people to use them. And website URL, Instagram URL, artist CV, very straightforward. Is the Hamiltonian studio accessible? Low? Is there an elevator? No. So thank you for this question. The studio is not currently accessible. Unfortunately, it's a historic building and we do not have an elevator. We would love to make that happen sooner than later, but unfortunately, they make it really hard to do that. So you can only access it from 2 flights of stairs, and there's like a rear entrance that can be used to get to it. And then this is the references area. We don't reach out to the references until like the finalist phase. So if we feel like there's a need to reach out to references at that point, we'll do that. Otherwise, yeah. And this is a space for attachments. This can just be like supporting materials, like press coverage, reviews, exhibition catalogs, other public write-ups about your work. This doesn't affect scoring or anything. It's just like to add color to your application. What do you recommend for references? Former teachers, other artists? Yeah, former teachers are always great. Teachers are great because they can kind of speak to work ethic, especially if it's a teacher maybe who's in an arts capacity. They can speak to your commitment to your practice, things like that. Other artists are great too because they can speak to how you show up as a member of community or as a collaborator, any of the case. Yeah, those are good options. I would say, for instance, if you're an artist who's worked with other arts workers before, for instance, like if you've been in a residency program, for instance, and you had the residency manager who you were in touch with, that is a great reference because that person has facilitated some kind of program with you in it and seen you participate in a program, say like a curator that you've worked with before. Those are all good references. Can it be someone who has bought your work? I would say it depends. So if it's someone who's bought your work, for instance, like, you had an exhibition, the person just like came in and bought a piece. I would not say that that's a strong reference because that person doesn't know you necessarily. They maybe just bought a piece. But if it's a person who has acquired your work, who's maybe more of that actually like has a relationship with you as a patron, then I would say that is a worthwhile person to list as a reference because that person maybe has like had exposure to talking with you about your work, is an admirer of your work, has appreciation for your work that goes beyond just like a buying relationship, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
And then, yes, and then portfolio here. With the portfolio, a big thing is like, I would suggest adding artwork images of pieces that you've made within the past 2 or 3 years because it's recent work, right? So you want to see like what your practice is now, today. If you want to maybe include like 1 or so pieces from that are older than that, then like that's fine. Maybe you want to show a bit of like, oh, I kind of started as in working in this way and it kind of led to where my work is now. Maybe you want to kind of illustrate that. That's cool. But definitely I would not suggest filling your portfolio with old work because that is how you make jurors ask the question, I don't know what this person looks like. I feel like I don't know what their work is today. Like if I were to ask them to make a piece now, like what would that look like? That's a big one. And then also maximize the real estate. So it's like if you only have, you can only do up to 10 images. So at that point, I would suggest definitely your strongest work, again, recent work, and then also as kind of breadth of artwork, right? So it's like I wouldn't suggest uploading 2 pieces that are super similar, like that are essentially doing the same thing, because then at that point it becomes a little bit redundant. So I would suggest really spending time with those images and asking yourself, like, for each image or each artwork that you're adding to your portfolio, asking like, what does this add? Like, what does this say about my practice and what is this helping to reflect as a kind of holistic thing? So that way you understand, okay, like all together, what is like the story and like what can people understand about my work, about my strengths in terms of technical skill, conceptual interests, quality of work, things like that. And definitely do your best to upload clear images. Is there a conversion scale for video to image? For example, 1 minute of video equals 1 image. Individual. So it's not actually, there's no conversion scale. So it's just based on the file. So any video of any length would equal to 1 image. The video samples can't exceed 3 minutes in duration. So that's a factor. And then also jurors probably aren't going to watch a full 3 minutes. The jurors will probably watch like some. Anything you upload that's video, I would, like general practice, expect or upload a understanding that they'll probably only watch like an excerpt of it because there's just too much to look at. Would you say more about composition of the portfolio? like use of detail image versus different mediums, or a full body of work like only paintings and sculpture. Full body of work like only paintings and sculpture. So detail images, I think detail images are important if there's a work that maybe the artwork image just as its own, as a standalone. Maybe if it's a piece where it's like you cannot appreciate what the work really is offering without a detail image of that work, then I would say include a detail image. It really depends on the piece. Like some pieces you can really just get it like through the one image of it to scale, and you're not really missing out so much. But if it's something where the detail is extremely important and you completely miss it otherwise, then make sure you include at least one detail shot. I would say don't go crazy on the detail shots, because again, you only have so many like files you're able to upload. So I would say keep it as like minimal as possible. And then in terms of different mediums, I would say, like, for instance, if you're someone who's multidisciplinary and it's like, oh, I can paint, I can draw, I can do sculpture, I can do all of these things, really call yourself back to the proposal that you're kind of mapping out in one of those questions that's like, tell us about an aspect of your practice that you're looking to expand upon leading up to your solo show, right? Like, think about that question and curate your portfolio in alignment with that question. So if in that question you're talking about, oh, I'm working heavily in this kind of like almost painting meets sculptural like object kind of space, then, and I want to expand on that and like dig into that, then your portfolio should reflect that by, showing works that kind of start to get at that, because you might have like a really strong narrative in terms of like that answering that question. And then when the juror goes to your portfolio, if they're like looking at a bunch of drawings, it's like, okay, what's the. So I would just say give jurors an opportunity to really like see that in the work after reading that question, because they're going to want to, that is the opportunity to then basically give that a visual, give them a kind of sense of what it is you're getting at. So hopefully that like answers the question. And then, yeah, so then after that's it. And then you submit your application fee and then you are done. Yes. Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you for that question too. That's like a really important point. I think some people, especially in such a multidisciplinary age, I think people rightfully so want to show they can like make in a lot of different kinds of ways, which can be a skill in itself. But I think for the nature of this application, you're really best off being strategic about that portfolio. Does anybody have any other questions for me?
You mentioned that the shows would be staggered in the second year solos. Is there a way that you guys decide the schedule?
So usually we stagger it based on a few different factors. Sometimes, we think about, okay, what are the kinds of shows that I think do well for certain kinds of seasons of the year? Like, I think it just really kind of depends on the nature of those people's work. And then also a factor too is like, oh, this person is already really in the thick of developing like some of the work that they'll probably want to show for their exhibition. And then in those scenarios, it's like, oh, that person will totally be ready for like that first slot, like they'll be ready. Usually for the person who gets it like the first slot, it's based on like who's going to be ready the soonest, just based on where they're at in terms of locking in an idea, locking in like the kind of work they're going to be making. That's usually like the person who goes right after that year's New Now debut. And then from there, it gets a little bit more into the weeds of like, okay, what is the theme of that person's show and how does that maybe align with the vibe of spring, or like, okay, fall is a really busy season, lots of competition in terms of who's seeing what shows, who's someone who can really draw that like local audience because maybe they like know they're just more established in this area. You know what I mean? There's like a lot of different factors. So we kind of, and then also sometimes it's like, oh, this person, we've had people who are parents in the program. It's like, oh, this person is literally pregnant and it's like going to be due around this time. How do we, well, let's try to accommodate that. There's a lot of different factors, personal, like art world factors, practice factors, life stuff happens. Also, sometimes we'll do swaps if it's needed. Usually what we do is we put those things together for ourselves. We offer up the schedule to the artist and are like, hey, let us know if you can commit to these dates. And then sometimes the answer will be like, hey, that doesn't work for me. And then from there, we're like, okay, how can we align and swap for you? And maybe you can trade with another artist who's open to switching.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And the other question I had, since it's a 2-year program, are we also engaging with the fellows from the previous year, or is it just our cohort?
Yeah, so it overlaps. So we have 2 active cohorts at any given time. So, that's why we have like, maybe if the year is 2022, like the people who are active in that cohort will be like 2021 to 2022 fellows, and then also like 2021 to 2023 fellows, and then also like 2022 to 2024 fellows. So there's like that overlap of first year and second year fellows. And there is interaction between those 2 cohorts, typically most often through the project presentation meetings, because say if you're a first year fellow, typically that season there's project presentation meetings for the second year fellows because they're like getting in the groove of their solos. So you might not be presenting because you're a first year and your show isn't for another like year, but you are attending those presentations to engage with the work of those second years and give like critique and like offer feedback. So they're also like any professional development programming that we do internally or publicly, both cohorts get invited to that. Like there's overlap across the whole thing. There's not really anything exclusive to like say second year or first year people. I think maybe the only thing is like first years do New Now together, and like second years aren't involved in that because they did their New Now like their first year.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And we really encourage it's really important for first and second years to interact, because like the first years get to see what they're going to be doing like the following year. And yeah, I find it very productive. So, and we've had a lot of, usually, of course, naturally, there's more, I think, close-knit interactions between people in their immediate cohort. It just happens that way a lot of times, but sometimes people end up getting really close with somebody who's not even in their immediate cohort. Maybe a solo exhibition says Visarts at Rockville, Maryland count. Yes, I would say those count as part of the greater DC area because those are places that I believe are like metro accessible. How much interaction is there between the artists? Is there in weekly meeting? There's not weekly meetings. Like I said, we try not to be too demanding on people's schedules. People have like a lot going on, and there's just like people work all the time these days because you like have to. And so yeah, we try not to do anything too like time intensive, like weekly meetings. We do project presentation meetings on a bi-monthly basis. So, and that is on site. We'll do like virtual accommodations, for instance, if somebody happens to be away on residency or just for some reason just can't participate on site, then we will let that person participate remotely and it'll be hybrid. But beyond that, that is generally something we do on site. And then generally, of course, like artists will see each other at opening receptions or like see each other in our little like virtual programs and things like that. We always encourage artists though to interact individually. You know what I mean? Like I always say, even if it's not me sitting you in front of another artist or like us putting together the space, like always, if you're curious about talking more to someone, just reach out. Like they're your peers. You should be continuing those conversations, have those one-on-one studio visits, have coffee, have meetings. We really encourage independent, like taking initiative to build those relationships outside of facilitated programming. Interaction with more advanced professional artists. Yes, more advanced professional artists will have people come in and do artist talks with artists directly. For instance, we had like Nikisha Durrett do a talk on giving a good artist talk. Sounds like, but yeah, she did a really good talk on how to give a good talk, and it was really helpful. And there are lots of opportunities. I think also just different professional artists will like be in our kind of orbit of the Hamiltonian artist community. Also, a lot of times in terms of mentoring, some of the mentors, sometimes artists are really interested in being mentored by a more established artist. We've also had fellows who are interested in being mentored by someone who's more of like an arts academic or a curator or someone who like works in the museum space. Depends on, the person. But yeah, plenty of our mentors who have come through the program are established artists. Naturally, I think, people are interested in that. Oh, and somebody had said, who are the jurors? Are they the mentors? Yes, the jurors are listed on our website. We're also going to announce them like probably tomorrow or the following day. Fabiola Ardelgado, who is a DC-based curator, independent curator. She is one of our jurors this year. Shante Gates, DC-based artist, established artist. Edgar Reyes, who's an artist and a professor and a Hamiltonian Artists Fellowship alumni, is a juror. Patrick Bova, who is the co-owner and director of April, located in Pittsburgh, and Emily Smith, who is the director of 1708 Gallery in Richmond. Those are the 5 jurors this year. And no, they are not mentors. We've had previous years where jurors are mentors. We've kind of adjusted that model because, the way that we go about selecting jurors is not necessarily the same as the way we would go about selecting mentors. And we select jurors completely independent from the artists that are, of course, later selected. So we really want fellows to have some kind of say in terms of like who they get assigned to for their mentor. Sometimes it happens that it aligns with somebody who has been a juror previously or is in that juror pool. Oh, Luis Vasquez LaRoche, who was a juror for last year's fellowship review process, they were later like identified as a mentor for one of our current fellows now, who actually was selected in their juror cycle. So sometimes it works out that way where it's like, oh, there's someone who was brought into our kind of orbit through being selected as a juror and just makes sense for a particular fellow's mentor selection. But no, we don't do it one-to-one anymore. It's like a kind of separate process that happens then once the fellows start their program. Cool. And I think that's all I see in terms of questions in the chat. Does anybody have any final questions? We have a couple minutes left. Oh, website, social media presence required. No, it's not required. I actually didn't see this question. The website is always a good idea. I think that sometimes maybe it feels like there are maybe some gaps from artist application, maybe in terms of the portfolio or maybe their artist statement. Maybe a juror will be curious and like want to see if the website offers a little bit more color. But for instance, like that's not at all that's not a factor in terms of scoring, like at all in terms of our criteria. So it wouldn't affect your score if you have like a website or not. Jurors are not like, we actually ask jurors that they don't factor that in. And it's kind of just like a separate thing, like if they're curious about it. And then social media presence, definitely not expected or required. That's just like the person who's reviewing it is curious. Sometimes people's social media these days for artists, they'll let their social media, like Instagram, function as a website. So that's also if you don't have a website, but you're like, oh, I use my Instagram as my, portfolio or whatever, you can totally put that. It doesn't have to be your personal Instagram for sure, like your personal social media. You don't need to put that. Should the artist statement be about current practice or proposing work? The artist statement is just like purely your artist statement. So the artist statement should reflect your practice as a whole, not about your specific, maybe it's not about a specific body of work or your proposed work. Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you all very much for your interest in the fellowship program. There's still time to apply. I know it seems like there's like no time left, but there is almost 2 weeks. So definitely start your applications if you have not already. And there are office hours available. You can visit our website for that information on how to sign up for them, or like go to the link in our Instagram bio, whatever is easiest for you. And yeah, good luck with your applications. And I hope to see you all around the gallery sometime soon.
Thanks, Anisa.
Good night.
Right.